The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long golden shadows across the dusty plains. A lone cowboy rode steadily toward a small village nestled at the edge of a canyon. The wind carried the smell of dry grass and smoke from distant fires, and his horse's hooves kicked up small clouds of dust with every step. He had been traveling for days through wide open spaces where the only company had been the wind and the occasional hawk circling overhead. The cowboy's face was tanned and weathered, etched with lines from years spent under the sun. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, a dusty coat, and boots that had seen better days. Slung across his back was a rifle, and at his side hung a leather bag containing the little he carried in the world. As he approached the village, he slowed his horse to a cautious walk. He had heard stories of the Apache people from other travelers, tales of bravery, honor, and fierce protectors of their land. He knew that one wrong move could turn curiosity into suspicion, and suspicion into anger. The cowboy's eyes scanned the village from a distance. Small huts made of mud and timber dotted the clearing, and smoke curled lazily from a few chimneys. Children ran and played near the edge of the village, their laughter floating lightly on the wind. Older men and women moved about with purpose, tending to daily chores, yet a sense of watchfulness hung in the air. He reined in his horse near the outskirts, giving a respectful distance from the village. The horse snorted softly, sensing the tension. The cowboy patted its neck and whispered, "Easy, boy, just a little longer." He took a deep breath and tried to steady his own nerves. He had faced many dangers on the trail, storms, wild animals, and lawless men. But this was different. This was a people with traditions as old as the land itself. He needed to show respect, to prove that he came in peace. As he dismounted, several villagers noticed him. They stopped what they were doing and began to gather, forming a cautious circle. Their eyes were sharp, measuring, and wary. The cowboy took another deep breath and raised his hands slightly to show he meant no harm. He spoke in a calm voice, though it sounded foreign and slightly rough to the villagers' ears. "I am a traveler. I mean no harm. I only seek shelter for the night and food if you can spare it." For a moment there was silence. The children hid behind their parents' legs, peeking curiously at the stranger. The elders stepped forward, their faces serious and unreadable. The chief, a tall man with a commanding presence, observed the cowboy carefully. His eyes were like hawks, sharp and knowing, scanning for any sign of deceit. He did not speak at first, letting the silence stretch. It was a quiet test, a pause that carried more weight than words. The cowboy waited patiently, understanding that in this place, actions mattered more than words. He removed his hat, holding it to his chest, a gesture of respect he had learned over the years from stories of people who valued honor above all. He slowly knelt and set down his bag, making sure none of his movements seemed threatening. The villagers murmured among themselves, speaking in low tones that the cowboy could not understand. He sensed that they were debating what to do with him, weighing the potential risks of allowing a stranger into their midst. A young warrior stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of a knife. He was tall, muscular, and moved with a quiet confidence that spoke of experience in battle and survival. The cowboy met his gaze without flinching, showing neither fear nor arrogance. The young warrior circled him slowly, inspecting him from head to toe, studying his stance, his clothing, and the rifle at his back. The cowboy kept his eyes calm and steady, making no sudden movements. The chief finally spoke, his voice deep and commanding. "Who are you, and why have you come here?" The words were few but carried authority. The cowboy stood slowly, keeping his hands visible. He bowed slightly and replied, "I am a traveler seeking rest and food. I have no quarrel with you or your people." The chief's eyes narrowed, studying the cowboy's face. He could sense the truth in the man's voice, yet he knew appearances could be deceiving. He gestured for the young warrior to stay close. The village watched silently, waiting for a sign, a movement, any indication of what would happen next. The cowboy felt the weight of their scrutiny, the quiet judgment that seemed to pierce deeper than any blade. Hours seemed to stretch as the cowboy remained in the village square, seated on a small rock, waiting for the elders to confer. He noticed the intricate carvings on the wooden poles around him, the carefully woven baskets at the doorways, and the small fires where people were cooking. Every detail told a story of a people deeply connected to the land and their traditions. He admired the care and skill, understanding that he was in a place where life moved to a different rhythm, one of patience, respect, and observation. As evening approached, The sky turned shades of pink and orange, reflecting off the canyon walls. The air grew cooler, and the cowboy rubbed his hands together to keep warm. He had traveled far and carried little, but he felt a strange sense of humility here, standing in the midst of a people who had lived for generations in harmony with the land. He realized that earning their trust would take more than words. It would take patience, respect, and a willingness to understand their ways. The chief finally rose and walked toward him, the young warrior still by his side. The cowboy stood, keeping his posture calm and respectful. The chief stopped a few feet away and studied him closely. "You have come far," he said slowly, his voice carrying both curiosity and caution. "But many come with false intentions. How do we know your heart is true?" The cowboy met his gaze steadily. "I have nothing to hide and no harm in my heart. I only wish for a place to rest and to share what little I have. I honor your people and your ways." The chief nodded slightly, though his expression remained guarded. He motioned for the young warrior to step back, but the warrior's eyes never left the cowboy. There was a subtle acknowledgement in the chief's movement, a recognition of the cowboy's sincerity, yet the judgment had not yet been passed. The village remained quiet, the suspense hanging in the air like a tangible thing. Night began to settle over the village. Stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, and the first sounds of nocturnal animals echoed through the canyon. The cowboy remained seated, knowing that the moment had come to demonstrate patience. He understood that trust could not be rushed. He watched the villagers move about, catching glimpses of their lives, children helping their mothers, elders tending fires, and warriors maintaining their equipment. Every movement was purposeful, deliberate, and full of meaning. A small boy eventually crept forward, curiosity overcoming caution. He held a small wooden toy and offered it to the cowboy without a word. The cowboy smiled softly and nodded in gratitude, accepting the gift with care and placing it gently beside him. The villagers watched this small interaction closely, sensing that gestures like these, though quiet, spoke volumes about character and intention. The chief finally motioned for the cowboy to follow him to a larger hut at the center of the village. The cowboy rose, picked up his bag, and followed silently. Inside, the chief gestured for him to sit near the fire. The warmth was welcome after the long day of travel. The chief remained standing, his eyes still measuring and sharp. He began to speak of the tribe's history, their values, and the importance of loyalty and honor. The cowboy listened intently, understanding that this was part of his test, not just to survive the night, but to show respect for their customs and wisdom. The night deepened, and the sounds of the village quieted, leaving only the crackle of the fire and the distant call of owls. The cowboy reflected on his journey, realizing that every step had led him to this moment. He knew that the next hours would determine whether he would be accepted or sent away, yet for the first time in days he felt a sense of belonging, a connection to people who had seen the land long before he had arrived. The chief finally spoke again, his voice softer now, tinged with the wisdom of years. "You are far from home, stranger, but perhaps if your heart is true, you may find a place among us, even if only for a night." The cowboy nodded respectfully, a sense of relief washing over him. He knew the night was only the beginning, and that the judgment of the tribe would not be quick or easy. Yet, in that quiet moment, surrounded by the firelight and the shadows of the village, he felt the fragile threads of trust beginning to weave between him and the people who had once viewed him with suspicion. And so, as the night deepened and the stars shone brighter over the canyon, the cowboy sat by the fire, feeling the weight of the journey behind him and the uncertainty of the future ahead. He had entered the village as a stranger, watched and measured, but he remained patient, respectful, and calm. In the quiet heart of the Apache village, under the gaze of the chief and the watchful eyes of the tribe, the first chapter of a story that could change everything had quietly begun. The first light of dawn spread across the village, casting long shadows of the huts and the people moving about their daily routines. The cowboy awoke by the fire in the chief's hut, careful not to disturb the few villagers still lingering in the shadows. His horse tied nearby shifted softly, reminding him of the miles still left behind. He had slept little, not from fear, but from a quiet awareness that the day ahead would be difficult. The chief had promised a council to decide the fate of the traveler, and the cowboy knew that nothing could replace patience and respect. As he stepped outside, the village was already alive with activity. Smoke rose from cooking fires, the smell of roasted corn and herbs mingling in the crisp morning air. Children ran between the huts, laughing, their energy a sharp contrast to the cautious, measured movements of the elders. The warrior who had first approached him the previous evening was already by the central clearing, standing tall and alert, eyes scanning the horizon. The cowboy took a deep breath, adjusted his coat, and walked toward the council area, making every movement calm and deliberate. When he arrived at the clearing, the elders were seated in a circle around a large fire pit. Their faces were serious, lined with age and wisdom. The chief stood at the center, arms crossed, a figure of authority and scrutiny. The cowboy bowed slightly from a distance, a silent gesture of respect. No one spoke immediately, the tension thick in the morning air. The council had begun their quiet deliberation even before words were exchanged. The chief gestured for the cowboy to step closer. "You have come far," he said slowly, his voice carrying both curiosity and caution. "You have passed through lands not meant for strangers. Tell us again why you are here." The cowboy took a steady breath. "I am a traveler," he began, voice clear but humble. "I mean no harm to your people. I only seek rest, food, and the chance to continue my journey safely. I respect your ways and your home." A murmur ran through the elders. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes and a steady voice, spoke next. "Many say words, but actions reveal truth. How can we know your heart is not guided by greed, fear, or anger? How can we know that you are not here to bring harm?" The cowboy nodded slowly. He understood the question, and he knew that speaking alone would not be enough. He needed to show his intentions through deeds, even in a setting where words were measured and silence held meaning. The chief looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing each line of his face, each movement of his hands. "The land tells stories," he said finally. "The wind, the earth, the fire, they remember those who come with honesty and those who come with lies. Show us that your presence is a blessing, not a burden." The cowboy swallowed. He had traveled through countless towns and settlements, yet nothing had prepared him for this level of scrutiny. Here, trust was not given freely. It was earned. He nodded, lowering his gaze in humility. "I understand. I will not speak empty words. I will show you that I mean no harm." He slowly reached into his bag and produced a small bundle of supplies, a few dried herbs, a piece of cloth, and some simple tools. He offered them with care, placing them gently on the ground before the elders. "I carry little, but what I have is given freely to those I respect." One of the elders, a man with a weathered face and deep-set eyes, leaned forward to inspect the items. He studied them carefully, turning the cloth in his hands and sniffing the herbs. The other elders watched, whispering among themselves. The cowboy remained still, keeping his hands visible, showing patience and a lack of urgency. Every small gesture mattered, each movement a statement of his character. The young warrior who had first approached him stepped forward. He circled the cowboy again, this time slower and more deliberate, observing how the stranger responded to scrutiny. The cowboy met his gaze steadily, without flinching, without showing arrogance or fear. He understood that respect was a silent language, one that spoke louder than any explanation. The warrior's eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them, a recognition that the man before him had patience, and perhaps a kind of courage. The chief finally raised his hand, signaling for silence. He turned to the elders and spoke with measured words. "We have seen travelers come and go. Some bring peace, others trouble. Today we must decide the path this man will take among us. It is not a decision made lightly. Our laws, our customs, our honor, they are not swayed by urgency or fear. Let us hear what each of you has seen and felt." One by one the elders spoke. They discussed the cowboy's demeanor, his gestures, and his offerings. They debated whether his presence could threaten the village or whether he could bring value through stories, skills, or simple goodwill. Some remained skeptical, recalling past encounters with outsiders who had brought misfortune. Others saw the sincerity in his eyes, the calm steadiness in his actions, and whispered quietly about trust and intuition. The conversation was long, filled with pauses, glances, and thoughtful consideration. The cowboy listened without interrupting, knowing that the council's process was as important as the final decision. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The village seemed to breathe with the slow rhythm of deliberation. The children stopped playing at times to watch, sensing that this moment was important even if they could not fully understand why. The cowboy began to feel the weight of the judgment, yet he remained composed. He understood that patience and humility were not signs of weakness, but of strength. Finally, the chief spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "We have watched you, traveler. We have seen your gestures and your silence. We have felt your presence among us. Yet the final word is not mine alone. We must see the heart of the man, the truth that lies beyond words and actions. It is the balance between intent and honesty that will guide our judgment." The cowboy nodded, feeling a quiet respect for the process. He realized that being here was not only a test of his character, but also an opportunity to learn from people whose lives were deeply intertwined with the land and each other. He had encountered many forms of judgment in towns, saloons, and homesteads, but none like this, a council that measured spirit, patience, and integrity above all else. The warrior moved closer, finally speaking in a voice that was calm but firm. "If you are truly without harm, show us how you care for what is around you. Take part in our tasks, learn what we hold sacred, and demonstrate that your presence brings more than risk." The cowboy agreed immediately, bowing slightly. He followed the warrior as he moved to a group of villagers tending the small crops near the edge of the clearing. He offered his help, using his knowledge of the land to water and care for the plants, careful to observe the methods of the Apache people. He listened, asked questions respectfully, and adapted quickly, showing that he was willing to learn, not just to speak. The elders watched this quietly, nodding at his attention and care. The chief observed, arms crossed but eyes sharp, noting each moment. The cowboy's actions spoke as loudly as any words could, his sincerity beginning to resonate with the tribe. It was a slow process, each small task a step toward trust, each gesture a bridge across the gap of suspicion. As the day passed, the village began to see him not only as a traveler, but as someone who could respect their ways. He shared stories of his journey, carefully choosing words that honored their traditions and showed willingness to listen, to understand, and to contribute. The council took note, observing his interactions, weighing each decision he made, and seeing the integrity behind his calm demeanor. Evening came, bringing the soft glow of the setting sun. The council reconvened around the fire pit. The villagers gathered quietly in the background. The chief rose and addressed the cowboy, his voice steady. "You have spent the day among us, showing patience, respect, and understanding. The council has witnessed your actions and your heart. We have seen a man who seeks neither harm nor dishonor, but carries the possibility of friendship and learning." The cowboy felt a surge of relief, though he remained cautious. He understood that the day's events were only part of a longer journey, and acceptance would continue to be earned. The chief gestured toward the elders, who nodded in agreement. The young warrior, standing near, gave a slight bow, a silent acknowledgement of the cowboy's perseverance and respect. Though the judgment had not yet fully concluded, a sense of cautious hope filled the air. The cowboy knew that trust was a living thing, grown slowly through deeds, patience, and integrity. He had taken the first step into a world that was wary but open, a community bound by history, honor, and the wisdom of the land. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet strength of the Apache people, he understood that this encounter would shape not only his journey, but the stories he would carry with him for the rest of his life. The night had settled over the village, wrapping the huts and the fire pits in a quiet darkness broken only by the flicker of flames and the soft cries of nocturnal animals. The cowboy sat near the central fire, his body tired from the day's work but his mind alert, replaying every gesture, every glance from the elders and warriors. Though he had shown respect and patience, he understood that acceptance was not yet complete. Trust was a delicate thing, built slowly, and tonight would test it in ways he could not yet predict. From the shadows, he noticed a figure moving lightly among the huts. A young woman, poised and quiet, observed him from a distance. She did not approach immediately, instead standing behind a tree, her eyes steady and curious. The cowboy sensed her gaze and offered a small nod, a gesture of acknowledgement. She tilted her head slightly, her expression thoughtful, before disappearing back into the darkness. He could feel the weight of her observation, though he did not know who she was or what role she played in the village's decision. The chief, seated beside the fire, finally broke the silence. His voice was calm but firm, carrying the authority of years spent leading and judging. "Traveler, you have spent the day among us. You have shown patience and respect. But the final decision is not mine alone. Our customs demand that the heart be seen, not only through deeds but through understanding." The voices of all, even those who may not speak often, must be heard. The cowboy nodded, realizing that the chief was speaking of more than the council. It was the collective judgment of the tribe, including those whose eyes and ears had quietly taken note throughout the day. He stayed near the fire, his hands folded in his lap, and waited. He had learned that in this village, silence was a language, and observation could reveal more than words ever could. Hours passed, and the fire crackled softly, casting shadows that danced across the circle of elders. The villagers had retreated to their homes, leaving only the council, the young warrior, and the cowboy. The air was still heavy with anticipation. The chief's eyes, dark and penetrating, never left the traveler. Then, without warning, the silence was broken by the soft sound of footsteps. The young woman from earlier stepped into the firelight. She moved with grace, carrying herself with confidence, yet without arrogance. Every eye turned toward her as she approached the council. The cowboy watched her closely, noticing the subtle strength in her posture, the calmness in her movements. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she stopped a few feet away from the circle, her gaze sweeping over the gathered elders before settling on the cowboy. The council remained silent, waiting, and the chief's expression tightened, a mixture of curiosity and concern. Finally, the young woman spoke, her voice clear and calm. "I have watched him today. I have seen how he moves, how he treats our people and our land. I have listened to the stories he shares, and I have felt the truth in his actions." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly, but he remained still, letting her words hang in the air. The cowboy felt a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. He did not know who she was, yet her presence carried authority and meaning. She took a few steps closer, her gaze unwavering. "We judge many travelers by fear and caution, but our land and our hearts know more than words. This man has shown respect and patience. He has not rushed, not argued, and not sought to prove himself through force. He has listened, observed, and acted with care." Her words were simple, yet each carried weight, echoing through the quiet night. The chief finally spoke, his voice measured. "And what do you wish us to do, child?" His tone was not harsh, but it carried the weight of responsibility, a subtle reminder that judgment was serious and consequential. The young woman looked at the cowboy, then back at the council. "I say he is not here to harm. Let his heart and actions guide your judgment. Observe, yes, but let us not be blinded by fear of what has been in the past. Sometimes the heart knows truth that the mind cannot yet see." The silence that followed her words was heavy with thought. The elders exchanged glances, murmuring softly among themselves. The chief's expression remained unreadable, yet the subtle shift in the atmosphere was undeniable. Something had changed, though no one yet spoke directly about it. The cowboy felt a sense of cautious hope. He understood that her words, though few, carried immense power. They were not commands, yet they had the ability to influence the minds of the council, to shape the way trust and judgment would be given. He lowered his gaze slightly, bowing his head in respect, acknowledging both the council and the young woman's insight. The young woman continued, her voice carrying a quiet authority. "We have seen men come and go, some bringing trouble, some bringing gifts. But this man, he moves with care, with humility. Let us honor what we have observed and allow the possibility that he can be a friend, a witness, and a helper, rather than a threat." The council remained still, absorbing her words. The chief's gaze softened slightly, though his eyes remained sharp, reflecting a mind still at work, weighing every implication. The young warrior stepped forward, speaking in a tone that was calm but firm. "If we are to decide his place among us, we must also see how he interacts with our land and our people through the night. The night brings challenges of its own, tests that do not appear in the light of day. Let him share in our duties, tend to the fires, assist with watch, and be present without hesitation. Only then will we know if he belongs among us, even briefly." The cowboy nodded, understanding that the council's judgment extended beyond words, beyond observation in daylight. Trust was earned in every moment, in every action, no matter how small. The young woman finally stepped back, her eyes meeting the cowboy's once more. There was a quiet understanding in her gaze, a subtle acknowledgement that he had been noticed, that his presence mattered. Then she retreated into the shadows, leaving the council to their deliberations and the cowboy to the tasks that would determine his place among them. The night deepened, and the cowboy moved among the huts and fire pits, assisting where he could, offering help to those tending fires, bringing water to the small garden, and listening carefully to the whispered instructions of the young warrior. Every action was deliberate, showing respect and attention. The villagers observed silently, measuring each gesture, each movement, each decision. Hours passed and the air grew colder. The cowboy gathered wood for the fire, ensuring the flames remained strong, and helped keep watch for any dangers that might approach the village. The young warrior occasionally nodded, a quiet sign that he recognized the cowboy's diligence and care. The elders observed from a distance, their expressions thoughtful. The chief watched most closely of all, noting how the traveler adapted to the night's demands, how he worked without complaint or need for recognition. By the time the moon reached its highest point in the sky, the village had begun to relax slightly, sensing that the cowboy's heart and intentions were genuine. Children peeked from the shadows to see him move among the adults, helping quietly, never seeking attention. The young warrior's eyes reflected a mix of approval and surprise, as the cowboy demonstrated patience and respect that matched the values of the tribe. The chief finally spoke, his voice carrying over the quiet night. The night reveals truths that the day cannot. We have seen his patience, his care, and his humility, yet the final judgment must come not from me alone, but from all who have observed. Let each voice speak and let the heart guide the decision. The elders nodded, murmuring softly, their faces thoughtful. Even the young warrior looked to the others, seeking agreement and insight. The cowboy stood quietly, waiting, knowing that the night had brought him closer to understanding and trust. He had shown respect through his actions, patience through his work, and sincerity through his presence. Yet he understood that the final moment of judgment had not yet arrived, and that the chief's daughter's observation had shifted something in the air, a subtle force that could tip the scales toward acceptance. As dawn began to break, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold, the young woman reappeared, stepping lightly into the clearing. She approached the council, her gaze fixed on the cowboy once more. The council listened as she spoke, her voice calm and certain. We have seen him through the day and the night. His actions speak of a heart that seeks peace and understanding. Let us honor what we have observed. Allow him to continue among us, guided by respect and humility as he has already shown. The chief's eyes softened fully now, a subtle smile playing at the corners of his lips. He nodded to the elders, who murmured their agreement. The young warrior stepped back, finally allowing himself to relax, as did the rest of the village. The tension that had hung over the clearing for 2 days began to lift, replaced by a cautious sense of acceptance and hope. The cowboy bowed deeply to the council, then to the young woman who had spoken so decisively. He felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond words, a recognition that this small act of trust and courage had changed the course of his journey. In the quiet morning light, the village seemed warmer, more welcoming, and alive with the rhythm of life that had always been there, waiting for understanding and respect to find it. The sun was low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow across the village. The cowboy moved among the huts and fire pits, tending to the small tasks the villagers had asked him to handle. Though he had gained some acceptance, he could feel that the true test of trust was still ahead. Every glance from the elders and warriors reminded him that his presence was still under careful observation. He knew that the judgment of the tribe was not complete until every voice, every action, and every intention had been seen and understood. As he worked, he noticed the chief's daughter standing at the edge of the clearing, watching him intently. Her presence was quiet but commanding, and the cowboy felt the weight of her gaze. He paused, acknowledging her silently with a respectful nod. She returned the gesture, but her expression was unreadable. It was clear that she held a perspective that even the chief respected, and her judgment could change everything. The chief gathered the council again, this time calling for the elders, the warriors, and the young woman to speak together. The cowboy joined them in the central clearing, standing patiently with his hands visible, his body calm, and his posture humble. The villagers circled quietly, sensing that a moment of importance was about to unfold. The air was still, and the only sound was the crackle of the fire that had been kept alive since morning. The chief's voice broke the silence. We have watched this traveler for 2 days. We have seen his actions, his patience, and his care. Yet there are still questions that must be answered. Does he walk among us with true intention, or does his presence bring hidden harm? He looked around the circle, and then his eyes rested on his daughter, What do you see, child? His tone carried both respect and anticipation. The young woman stepped forward, her eyes steady and clear. She took a slow breath, letting her words gather weight. I have watched him and I have listened to him. I have seen how he treats our land, our people, and our ways. His heart is open, his intentions honest, and his respect true. The council listened in silence, their attention fully on her. She paused, letting the words sink in, and then spoke again, her voice carrying across the clearing. He is not here to harm. He is here to understand. The chief's daughter's 4 words hung in the air. He is not here. The council leaned forward instinctively, sensing the significance of her statement. The cowboy's breath caught slightly, realizing that these simple words had shifted the energy of the entire gathering. For the first time, the suspicion that had lingered in the eyes of the elders and warriors seemed to soften. The village itself seemed to exhale as if recognizing the truth in her perception. The chief nodded slowly, his expression still serious, but tinged with relief. He spoke, his voice calm but powerful. Your words are simple, yet they carry the weight of truth. Sometimes the heart sees what the mind cannot yet understand. You have given us clarity, child. He turned his gaze toward the cowboy. You have been tested, and in patience and respect you have shown that your presence is a blessing, not a threat. The cowboy bowed his head respectfully, feeling a mixture of gratitude and humility. He had never imagined that a few words could hold such power. Yet he understood the wisdom behind them. The chief's daughter had spoken not to command, but to reveal the truth that had been hidden beneath layers of fear and caution. Her insight had altered the path of the council, and by extension, the course of his journey. The young warrior stepped forward, his eyes reflecting a quiet approval. We have seen your actions, traveler. We have heard the words that speak truth. The night has shown us that your heart aligns with respect and care. If you wish to remain among us, you are welcome. His voice was firm but kind, acknowledging the cowboy's efforts and the young woman's insight. The elders nodded, their expressions softening, and the atmosphere of the village shifted from cautious scrutiny to tentative acceptance. The cowboy felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He understood that trust was not given lightly, and that the acceptance he had earned was not merely a reward for his actions, but a recognition of his integrity. He offered a quiet bow to the chief, the council, and the young woman, acknowledging the wisdom that had guided them in their judgment. There was a sense of unity in the clearing, a shared understanding that transcended words and rituals. As the sun continued its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the cowboy began to engage with the village in deeper ways. He shared stories of his travels, speaking humbly of the lands he had crossed and the people he had met. He listened attentively to the elders' tales, learning about the history, customs, and values that shaped their lives. Each interaction was an exchange of respect and understanding, reinforcing the trust that had begun to form. The chief's daughter remained nearby, observing quietly but with a sense of satisfaction. She had seen what others had missed, recognizing the honesty in the cowboy's actions and the sincerity in his heart. Her words had not only influenced the council's decision, but had also created a bridge between the outsider and the tribe. The cowboy sensed her presence as a quiet guidance, a reminder that perception and understanding were as important as actions. Evening approached, and the village gathered for a communal meal. The cowboy helped where he could, assisting with fire tending, food preparation, and the distribution of water. The villagers accepted his help without hesitation, a sign that the trust he had earned was taking root. Children approached him without fear, offering small gifts or curious questions, and he responded with patience and kindness. The young warrior watched these interactions with a nod of approval, and even the elders smiled softly, recognizing the harmony that was beginning to form. After the meal, the chief called for a moment of quiet reflection. The villagers gathered around the central fire, and the cowboy stood among them, feeling both honored and humbled. The chief spoke, his voice calm and deliberate. We have witnessed the heart of this traveler. His actions, his patience, and the words of our daughter have revealed his true intentions. Let this night be a reminder that judgment is not only in observation, but in understanding, and that trust is built through respect, humility, and the courage to see beyond fear. The words were met with quiet agreement, and the firelight danced across faces that were now open to acceptance. The cowboy felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had entered the village as a stranger, measured with caution and observed with suspicion. Yet through patience, respect, and the guidance of the chief's daughter, he had found a place, even if temporary, among a people who valued honor and understanding above all else. He realized that the journey he had undertaken was not only across the land, but also into the hearts of those he met. A journey that required humility, care, and insight. As night settled fully over the village, the cowboy stood quietly, reflecting on the events of the day. The chief's daughter approached once more, her expression calm and thoughtful. She did not speak immediately, allowing the silence to carry meaning. Finally, she said softly, "Your heart has been seen. Let it guide you well." The cowboy nodded, understanding the weight of her words. They were not just a reassurance, but a charge to continue living with honesty, respect, and awareness. The village slowly returned to its rhythm of night. With families retreating to their homes and the fires burning low, the cowboy remained near the central fire for a while longer, feeling the presence of the tribe as both a support and a reminder of the responsibilities that came with trust. He had learned that acceptance was not a simple gesture, but a living connection, nurtured through action, patience, and the courage to recognize truth. In the quiet of the night, the cowboy realized that the chief's daughter's 4 words had done more than change the council's decision. They had altered the course of his journey and opened the door to understanding, respect, and friendship. He felt a sense of belonging, however tentative, and a recognition that this village, this people, and this moment would remain with him long after he continued his travels. The night was still, the firelight soft, and the stars above the canyon glimmered like distant promises of a path guided by trust and honor. The morning sun broke over the canyon walls, casting light across the village in warm, golden hues. The cowboy awoke by the fire, feeling a quiet sense of belonging he had not experienced before. Last night had changed everything. The chief's daughter's words had shifted the judgment of the council, and he was now seen not as a stranger, but as a guest of honor, however temporary. He rose slowly, tending to his horse and belongings, ready to begin the day with a newfound understanding of the people and their ways. As he stepped into the village, he was greeted with nods and small smiles from the villagers, gestures of acceptance that warmed his heart. Children ran past him laughing and offering tiny gifts, flowers, stones, or small trinkets from their play. The young warrior approached and gave him a quiet nod, acknowledging that the cowboy had earned respect not only through words, but through action. The elders were already gathered, tending the morning fire and preparing for the day's chores. The chief watched from a distance, a quiet expression of approval on his face. The cowboy moved among the villagers, assisting with tasks where he could. He helped gather water from the nearby stream, worked with the elders to repair small huts, and carried firewood to those who needed it. Each act was performed with care and respect, and the villagers responded with trust rather than suspicion. There was a rhythm to the day, a shared understanding that grew from mutual respect and the quiet acknowledgement of the cowboy's sincerity. The chief's daughter appeared as she had the night before, observing quietly from the edge of the clearing. She did not speak immediately, but her presence reminded the cowboy that the trust he had earned was both fragile and precious. He worked with even greater care, mindful that every gesture mattered in a community that valued integrity and intention. Her eyes met his briefly, and he nodded respectfully, silently thanking her for the insight that had changed everything. As the day progressed, the villagers invited the cowboy to share in their stories and traditions. Around the central fire, they spoke of their history, of the lessons learned from the land, and of the values that guided their lives. The cowboy listened attentively, absorbing each tale with humility. When it was his turn, he spoke of his travels, of the landscapes he had crossed, and of the people he had met along the way. He chose his words carefully, honoring the tribe's ways and traditions, and the villagers listened with interest, curiosity, and respect. Meals were shared communally, with the cowboy participating fully, helping to prepare food and distribute it evenly. He noticed how the children looked to him for guidance, how the elders appreciated his careful hands, and how the young warrior gave subtle signs of approval for his attentiveness. The chief's daughter remained near, her calm gaze observing each interaction. Though she spoke little, her presence had a quiet authority that shaped the energy of the village, creating a sense of unity and understanding. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, The cowboy was asked to assist with a small ceremony, a way for the tribe to honor their ancestors and the land that sustained them. He followed instructions carefully, observing the rituals and participating with respect. He could feel the weight of history and tradition, understanding that this was more than a task. It was a bridge of trust and connection between him and the community. The elders nodded approvingly, the young warrior smiled quietly, and the chief's daughter's gaze held a hint of satisfaction. The chief approached the cowboy privately, speaking in a low, deliberate tone. "You have earned our respect and trust. You have shown patience, humility, and understanding. You are welcome to stay as long as you wish, but remember that trust is a living thing, not a gift to be taken lightly. Continue to act with honor, and you will find your place among us." The cowboy bowed deeply, acknowledging the wisdom in the chief's words. He understood that acceptance was not a single moment, but a continuous effort, nurtured through action, respect, and care. The evening approached, and the village gathered for another communal meal by the fire. The cowboy assisted where he could, helping to tend the fire, distribute food, and engage in conversation with the villagers. Children sat near him, asking questions about his travels and sharing their own stories. The elders watched quietly, smiling at the interactions, and the young warrior stood nearby, nodding in quiet approval. The chief's daughter observed, her calm presence guiding the energy of the gathering. As night fell, the cowboy found a quiet moment to reflect. He walked to the edge of the village, looking out over the canyon and the lands he had crossed. The journey had been long and difficult, but he realized that the true challenges were not in the miles traveled or the obstacles faced, but in earning the trust and respect of people whose lives were deeply rooted in tradition and honor. The chief's daughter's words had revealed the truth in him, and through patience, humility, and action, he had found acceptance. The villagers began to retreat to their homes, leaving the central fire burning softly. The cowboy remained near, feeling the presence of the community around him. The chief approached, followed by the young warrior and the elders. He spoke quietly, his voice carrying the calm authority of experience. "Your time here has shown us the value of patience and respect. You have proven that even strangers can walk among us with honor. Remember these lessons as you continue your journey, and let the trust we have given guide you in all your travels." The cowboy nodded, feeling the deep weight and honor of the words. The chief's daughter stepped forward, her expression calm and thoughtful. She placed a hand gently on the cowboy's shoulder, a silent gesture of acknowledgement and connection. "You are welcome here," she said softly, "not as a stranger, but as someone who has walked with respect and humility. Carry this with you always." The cowboy bowed deeply, understanding that her words were both a gift and a responsibility. He had found acceptance, friendship, and trust, and he knew that the lessons learned here would remain with him forever. As the night deepened, the cowboy joined the villagers around the central fire. One last time before settling for sleep, stories were shared, laughter floated in the air, and a sense of unity and peace enveloped the clearing. The children leaned on him, the elders nodded with quiet approval, and the young warrior offered a small smile of acknowledgement. The chief watched, his eyes reflecting satisfaction and wisdom, and the chief's daughter remained nearby, her calm presence a guiding light. The cowboy lay down near the fire, feeling the warmth and the acceptance of the village around him. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the trials of trust and patience, and the simple, profound power of words and actions. He realized that his path had been altered not only by his own choices, but by the insight and courage of those who had observed him. The chief's daughter's words, simple yet powerful, had revealed the truth in his heart, and the village had embraced it with honor. The night was quiet, filled with the gentle sounds of the canyon and the soft crackle of the fire. The cowboy felt a deep sense of gratitude, not only for the acceptance he had found, but for the lessons he had learned about trust, respect, and understanding. He knew that the journey ahead would continue, but he carried with him the knowledge that integrity, patience, and humility could bridge the gap between worlds, between strangers and community, and between fear and trust. As he drifted into sleep, surrounded by the calm presence of the village and the soft glow of the fire, he knew that this chapter of his life would remain with him forever. The cowboy had entered as a stranger, judged by suspicion and cautious eyes, and he had become part of a community that valued honor, respect, and understanding above all else. The chief, the elders, the young warrior, the children, And especially the chief's daughter had all played a part in this transformation, shaping not only his journey but the story he would carry for the rest of his life. In the quiet of the night, the village rested and the cowboy dreamed of the lands he had crossed, the people he had met, and the bonds of trust and respect that had been forged here. The fire burned low, the stars shimmered above, and the canyon stood silent, a witness to the story of a traveler who had walked with honor, and a tribe that had recognized the truth in a heart that sought only understanding and peace.